You know, when we think of ancient battles, our minds usually jump to the clash of swords, the strategies, the big moments on the front lines. But what happens after? After the noise fades and the dust settles, that's often where the real story begins. So today, that's where we're going, into a story of incredible human strength that unfolded when the fighting was over.
So let's set the scene. We're at Mount Uhud. The battle has just finished. And honestly, it's been a tough day for the Muslim army. They've taken heavy losses, and their morale is hanging by a thread. The victorious Quraish army has a golden opportunity, right? They could just march on the city of Medina and finish the job. But that's not what happened.
Because what happened next was, frankly, a stroke of genius. At a spot called Hamra al-Asad, the Prophet ordered his exhausted soldiers to do something strange. Light hundreds and hundreds of torches all across the hills. Now, imagine you're a Quraysh scout seeing this from afar. It looks like a massive fresh army ready for round two. They were completely terrified, turned their army around, and went straight back to Makkah. It was a victory won without a single sword being drawn, just fire and some brilliant psychology.
But while this big strategic move was playing out, a much more personal story of resilience was happening right there in the camp. And this story belongs to the women who were present at Uhud.
Their job wasn't to fight, it was to support. And the most critical need right away was water. You had women like Aisha and Sulaim with these heavy leather water canteens on their backs, literally running back and forth. They'd rush to the wounded, give them water, and then run back to refill and do it all over again. Absolutely tireless.
And it wasn't just about thirst. They were the medics. Women like Hamna bin Josh and Rubaiyah bint Muawwidh were right there, treating injuries, bandaging wounds, and helping to carry the injured off the battlefield. I mean, this was not a passive role at all. This was courageous, hands-on, and absolutely essential work in the middle of all that chaos.
And people noticed. This service was deeply honored. There's this great story about the Caliph Umar. Years later, he was handing out some fine garments, and he gave a particularly nice one to a woman named Salit, even passing over his own family. When someone asked him why, he just said, for indeed she would run back and forth carrying canteens of water for us on the day of Uhud. Her effort was remembered as a true badge of honor.
So the role was clearly support. But in the chaos of a battle, things can change in a heartbeat. And there's this one extraordinary case where a woman's role had to shift from service to sheer survival.
So picture this. At one point, a rumor that the Prophet had been killed spreads like wildfire. Panic sets in, and many of the Muslim soldiers actually fled, leaving him incredibly exposed. He's protected by just a handful of companions. The enemy sees this and launches a direct attack.
In that split second, a woman named Ammaarah, also known as Nusaybah bint Ka'ab, sees what's happening. She doesn't hesitate. She grabs a sword, a shield, and throws herself into the fight. She wasn't a soldier, but she fought with this incredible ferocity to defend the Prophet. In the process, she received this many wounds. 13. Just think about that. An unbelievable act of courage.
Now, what's really important here is that the sources are crystal clear. This was not the norm. Her fighting was an act of last resort. It was an exception, born out of the absolute necessity of that moment. When the leader of your community is about to be killed, the obligation to defend him falls on everyone who is there, man or woman. It was a duty of the moment.
But you know, as terrible as they are, physical wounds eventually heal. The deeper battle, the one that truly tests a person's soul, was the one fought inside the heart. This was the test of faith in the face of just staggering loss.
And this is really the spiritual backdrop for everything that happens next. The community was told this would happen. They were told they would be tested with fear, with loss of life, but, and this is the key part, there was a promise of good news for those who could face it with a very specific kind of strength: patience.
So what does that even mean, true patience? Well, the Prophet taught something really profound. He said, true patience isn't the quiet acceptance you find months later when the pain has faded a bit. No. It's the strength you show in the very first moment you hear the bad news, the first stroke of calamity. This was a complete departure from the old pre-Islamic traditions of, loud wailing and public despair.
And some of the most powerful illustrations of this teaching came from the women who lost so much on that day. Their stories are just wow. Let's take a look. So first, we have Safiya, who was the Prophet's own aunt. Her brother was Hamza, one of the most beloved and powerful warriors in the community. And he hadn't just been killed. His body had been brutally mutilated by the enemy in an act of revenge.
When Safiya came to find him,
The Prophet was worried about the shock and grief she'd feel, so he sent someone to gently stop her. But her response was just incredible. She said, "It has indeed been conveyed to me that my brother has been mutilated. I will indeed be very patient, Allah willing." She didn't scream or wail. She went to her brother, prayed for him, and held fast to her faith. That right there, that is first-stroke patience in action.
Then you have the story of Hamna bint Jush. And remember her, she's the one we just saw tending to the wounded. As the Prophet was heading back to the city, he met her on the road, and he had to deliver just one piece of terrible news after another.
First, he told her that her brother had been killed, and she calmly replied, "To Allah we belong, and to Him we are returning." Then he told her that her uncle, Hamza, was also gone. Again, the same response, "To Allah we belong, and to Him we are returning." But then he had to tell her that her husband had also been martyred, and at that her composure broke, and she cried out, "Oh, great indeed is my sadness." The Prophet observed this, noting how special her husband must have been to her. It's such a deeply human moment, a reminder that patience doesn't mean you don't feel pain or love.
So when you put all these pieces together, the service, the defense, the profound grief, what are we really looking at? We're seeing a community in the process of completely redefining what strength and resilience actually mean.
It's really a massive shift. The old way was to kind of fight against fate, with this outward show of uncontrolled grief. The new, prophetic way was to find strength in surrender. That phrase, "To Allah we belong and to Him we are returning," it wasn't just words. It was like a psychological anchor. It was a conscious recognition that everything and everyone belongs to God in the first place. And that simple idea transforms grief from this helpless cry into an actual testament of faith. And that's really the heart of it all. The very same women who showed such incredible physical grit, lugging water and treating deep wounds, were the ones who showed this immense spiritual fortitude. Their service on the battlefield and their patience in loss weren't two different things. They were two sides of the very same coin, a profound, all-encompassing commitment to their community and to God. So the story of these women after Uhud, it leaves us with this question that feels just as relevant today. In a world that so often defines strength as being the loudest or the most aggressive or showing no emotion at all, they offer us a totally different model. It's a strength made of active service, of necessary defense, and maybe most powerfully, of a dignified surrender to a will greater than our own. And it makes us ask ourselves, what does true strength really look like when we face our own greatest trial?